What do you see missing in couples' sexual relationship?
Well, one thing I've noticed that people unconsciously believe it's someone else's job to make them turned on. When you're in love and you're in a relationship, your job is to generate your own turn on for your partner. I think date nights are really important. I actually see sexual connection as a nutrient, as a food that is the physical requirement, one of the physical requirements of the relationship success.
How does a couple navigate that relationship if we're actually just hurting ourselves and we're just addicted to this thing like a drug?
Here's the deal. There's no couples that are together that shouldn't be together, okay? That's my firm belief. Why? Because you come to a relationship as an educational opportunity to get a particular nutrient or upgrade in your consciousness. And until you get that nutrient or that upgrade in your consciousness, you're actually not supposed to leave. In order to share a feeling, you have to be in your feeling.
And the feeling sometimes looks like anger. It
Yeah.
looks like it might be like shaking fists or shaking somebody or
Exactly.
like that's like
And there's no problem with anger. The problem with anger that we mostly have here is anger comes with blame.
right.
But they're not the same thing.
Annie Lalla.
Hi.
Thank you for doing that.
Yay.
How was the breathing, breathwork experience for you?
Somewhere I was like, oh shit, I might collapse. But then I was like, just trust him. Just keep going.
Good.
I
Something
did some grounding too while you're breathing.
I love
Just
that.
connected myself.
Something I was stewing on. It was coming up as we were breathing, as far as like interesting questions in relation to relationship. I feel like you've counseled probably, I don't know, I would imagine, you know, thousands or, you know, many human beings in their relationship woes or journeys. And I feel like people oftentimes, at least myself, we probably feel like the things that we're experiencing in relationship is very specific to us.
Yeah.
And it's very special and no one else knows what we're going through.
Yeah.
And something that I've experienced in talking to you, you're like, oh yeah, that's like the standard. Like what you're experiencing that you think is like so horrible or terrible or challenging or whatever. Like, no, this is it.
Yeah, I try to normalize it for the client, not just because it helps them feel less alone, but I like to let them know, like, this is a pretty classic dance, and I have technology to move through it, and they're in good hands, and I know what to do here. Like, you know, if you go into a doctor and they're like, I ain't never seen that rash before, everyone gets kind of scared. If they're like, oh yes, that's eczema, here's the cream, you're like, good.
What are some of the most consistent trends that you see in relationships, if they've never had someone like you to kind of have a 30,000 foot view to look down and say, no, this is actually totally normal. What are some consistent trends that you see come about most often when people are coming to you seeking help within their relationship? You're like, oh yeah, this is the thing this is like baseline. We see this all the time.
I think most conflict between couples tend to orient around two sacred polarities. You know, we tend to think of the masculine and the feminine coming together in romance, you know, whether they're heteronormative or not, the masculine or the feminine principle.
Yeah.
But I like to take gender out of it and just think about the two sacred polarities that make all successful relationships work long term is the sacred polarity of individuality, selfhood, me, sovereignty, autonomy.
Yeah.
And the sacred polarity of togetherness, communing, us, we. So these two sacred polarities, every relationship I see is like a living, breathing entity, and it breathes in, communion together, connection, and it breathes out, separation, individuality, autonomy. Together, apart. And just like your in-breath and your out-breath are equally important, you need both, and across your lifetime, there's about same amount of each. And so a lot of times the couples come together and one of them is guarding the sacred polarity of we, us, together, connection, communing. And they think that's what love is. And then the other partner is like guarding the sacred polarity of individuality, separateness, autonomy, not just for themselves, but for the other person. And they think true love is about having individual powerful lives that then choose to come together. And they're both right. And so I think most conflict comes up around one partner leaning towards, I don't feel like I'm getting enough connection time, love from you. And they're accurately standing for what the relationship needs, but oftentimes there's shadow attached to it, which can be like the classically anxious attached dynamic. They need more connection to supplement their lack of connection to themselves. Okay, so that's one piece of shadow. And then the other partner is standing for separateness, autonomy, individuality. And in a healthy relationship, both are equally present, equal amounts of differentiation and integration. I think of it as like coming together, coming apart. And the shadow of the individualist is the inability to stay with the sensations while they're in communion and breathe through that. So as soon as things get hectic and there's a lot of sensations in their body, feelings, intensity, they want to opt out and avoid and go beyond their own. But and that's how they find their way into calm. But the thing that makes that person feel safe actually makes the other partner feel terrified.
Yeah.
And what the other partner wants is, let's talk it out, let's hug it out, let's connect, let's talk it through. And they feel safe when they get to connect when they're stressed. But that actually makes the other partner feel terrified. So what I try to help each partner realize is the thing that makes you feel safe probably makes your partner terrified. And the feeling you feel when they leave the room, close the conversation, is the same feeling you feel, they feel when you're chasing them, trying to get an answer or a hug or make up.
Yeah.
So those are the two main dichotomies. Every relationship is a transcendence of many dichotomies on many vectors, but that's the fundamental one.
How does that formulate? Like, what's the origin of that for each person typically? A person that's more of a come together versus a person that's more of a solipsist, like go sort it out on my own. Like, how does that happen as a young person?
Well, I don't want to see this as a typology, like I'm an avoidant or I'm an attached. I have been both.
Yeah.
And usually you swing back and forth in relationships as you try them out. But the one that you end up being in your lifetime partnership tends to be the one you had to develop in response to the parent you had to earn love from. So I had a mom and a dad. I know they loved me, but I resonated better with my father's personality type. My mother is more emotionally unavailable, more physically pragmatic. I'm an emotional type. So I always struggled to connect with my mother. And in order to connect with my mother, I needed to leap outside of myself and be all up in her business to try and commune, because she's not natively a communer emotionally. So I become masterful at communing emotionally and guarding the us and managing the relationship in response to my mother's agenticism. So she was the more individualist, I-centered person, and my dad was the more communal, we-centered person. So the more fraught relationship I had was with my mom. I think it could have been, it doesn't matter the gender in my experience. It's just which relationship did you feel like, I wasn't sure if my parent loved me as much.
Wow, that's interesting.
So that's the parent that you form your imago or attachment imprint primarily around calling in a mate. So in the future, I knew that I would search for a mate that replicated this wound dance with my mom. So I knew I was going to find a guy who was emotionally unavailable, very pragmatic, and not able to meet me emotionally. And that's who I'd be attracted to. I found many guys who were emotionally astute and sophisticated, and I liked them, and they're my great friends, but I never felt the chemistry. So you always, when you're shopping for a partner, you're literally shopping for not just handsome, good-looking, funny. You're also shopping for a particular brand of heartbreak or owie that is familiar and nostalgic and reminds you of that original attachment imprint, the wound. So everyone thinks they're looking for someone with all these criteria on a resume, but they're actually also looking for someone that hurts them in a particular brand of owie that is familiar and nostalgic. And then you hire a partner to play out that role in a pantomime. And at the end of this scene with this relationship, you want to get what you didn't get the first time, which is to get them to love you the way you most needed from that parent, but never got. So I found Mr. Emotionally Unavailable. That's my husband. And I've spent 15 years teaching and training and calling forward the skill in him to attune empathically to my needs, wants, and emotions. And, we're not there 100%, but he's definitely miles forward. And the more he's become emotionally attuned to me, the more integrated he becomes as a man and as an individual and a father. So he's getting upgraded in his skill set, but the more I'm feeling loved and nurtured in the exact way that I most needed from my mom but didn't always get, and I'm now getting from my new attachment figure, my husband. So when you fall in love, all your wounds and glories of your original attachment imprint port right over to your new romantic partner. So whenever I would be talking to my husband and get into a fight or a grumble and my mom called, I'd kind of be mad at her too. Because in my brain, they were both occupying the same space. But you might not even be tracking that if you don't know how to track these attachment dynamics. And so, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, you are.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
okay.
So something that I've heard that I'm sure you've heard and imagine have perspective on is if you meet someone and you get butterflies in your stomach and you have that like initial attraction,
Yeah.
it would be potentially an indication to actually exit that situation because it's probably in association some type of like trauma bond or something. So they're reminding you of something that with one of your parents that you have issues with. What you're saying is kind of the opposite of that in a way. Yeah. So what are your thoughts of when you meet someone and you get the little butterflies in your stomach? Like what does that mean? What's
well, I want to honor the butterflies. I don't want to throw the butterflies out with the bathwater.
I don't. I think we should honor the butterflies. But that's something that I hear and I'm like, okay, I understand that as well.
Well, this trauma bond story. Here's the deal. You're always going to marry someone who drives you fucking crazy because it's by design. You literally hired them to replicate that original attachment wound.
Right.
So you're always going to have a complaint and a frustration about your partner. I knew I was going to marry an emotionally unavailable man who couldn't track my feelings and wasn't natively empathic the way I needed. So what am I going to do? I'm never going to be attracted to the like, oh, emotionally too super astute. They're not replicating the same character in the scene I want to play out. So I realized, okay, I'm always going to find an emotionally unavailable guy. Let me find the best looking, smartest, most intelligent, most committed to growth and personal development that I could find. And then I found him, and that's my husband.
And that general imprint will never entirely wash away. Like you'll always have some iteration or version of that. You'll just have a more integrated version of those attraction patterns and,
Well, I don't know, because, when I met my husband, I was definitely guarding the sacred polarity of we, us, connection, communion, empathy, always attuned to his needs and wants. What does the relationship need to feel healthy? On crack. That was me. And he was like individualist, selfing, alone time, actually got an apartment beside the one we lived in so that he could do his work and squirrel away. Like I was just like, oh my God, does he even want to be with me? Is he even in love with me? And over the last 15 years, we've been cross-training each other. The reason why you're attracted to your opposite in this dimension is because you want to cross-train your underdeveloped skill. Right. It's like one bicep's really big and the other one's atrophied. So in order to become balanced, you need to attract a partner that's sophisticated in the domain that you're not. And if the relationship unfurls appropriately, you cross-train each other. So over the 15 years, I've been asking and learning and apprenticing with my husband to learn how does he do his I, his selfing. I call it selfing versus othering. I'm a pro-otherer, always attuned to other people's needs and wants, and he's really good at identifying his needs and wants, to a fault, both of us. And so I've had him teach me, how do you say no when a group wants to go to this restaurant and they're all your friends and you say, no, I don't want to do that. How do you do that? Because I would just fold. And so I've had him teach me the inner game of selfing and autonomy. And I've taught him how to do empathy. But hold on, I'm not answering the question. What did you ask again? I got lost.
Oh, if you just become a more sophisticated version of that original kind of relational pattern that you have to your parents, or do you actually could you come to a point where you've integrated that lesson and now suddenly you actually terminate with that partner, you learned your lesson, and now you're actually seeking somebody completely different because that aspect of yourself that you were attempting to heal through the reflection of the partner is now integrated and healed, and now it's like cool into somebody else.
Well, that actually happened. So what I've noticed from my own personal experience is it's switched somewhere in the last 2 years. Yeah. I became more of a autonomous, separate individual. I'm like doing my own business. I want to go out with my friends. He's always like, let's hang out. Let's spend more time together. We've actually cross-trained each other to the level where we're integrating our underdeveloped skill in the second half of your life when you hit 50. You usually build up your underdeveloped skills because you've maxed out on your the areas that you have prowess in. Yeah. So in order to develop up the ladder of growth, you have to actually integrate those underdeveloped pieces. And so think of it as like a number line, and there's 0 in the middle. And over to the left is selfing, I-hood, individuality, and over on the right is communing, togetherness, connection. The closer as you cross-train, you get closer and closer to the center. So even though my husband and I still have this little, sometimes I go into we and he goes into me, and sometimes it goes the other direction, but we're both very near the center now because we've cross-trained so much. So if he does want to have time spent with me, I know what it was like to want connection and to not have it. And so the way I'll react to his request for connection is very sophisticated. Yeah. It's not the way he would have reacted like early days. Yeah. So it's not that the relationship terminates, it changes in character. Kind of like when a teenager goes through adolescence, its character changes. So the relationship has its own personality, its character, its needs, it wants, and it tells you what it wants to be when it grows up, and it never grows up completely. Yeah. There's some partners where you're continuously fascinated by the dance, it's a school you don't want to graduate from. I think of breakup as a graduation. It's not a failure. And so there's some systems that you never want to graduate from, and they continue to nourish you and expand you. And, a relationship should be a trampoline for your dreams and a sanctuary for your heart. And so long as you're getting that from your relationship, why would you leave?
Yeah. So something I wonder, a question that I'd imagine arise with you working with people is this relationship going to work? And are we just in some type of self-effacing, destructive trauma bond where we're actually just like cutting ourselves with this and we're not actually moving through anything? And the most integrating thing to do in this is choosing to walk away, compared to is it the darkest just before the dawn and we're just at the edge of the light at the end of the tunnel, and we just can't see it right now because we're actually like moving through something really meaningful. We should lean in and stick to it and keep going. How does a couple navigate that relationship if we're actually just hurting ourselves and we're just addicted to this thing like a drug, or we're really close to actually having a breakthrough and having this really beautiful relationship? I
would encourage people to take the latter as the default. That's what I would encourage.
Okay.
I almost always fight for the relationship to continue. Here's the deal. There's no couples that are together that shouldn't be together. Okay? That's my firm belief. Why? Because you come to a relationship as an educational opportunity to get a particular nutrient or upgrade in your consciousness. And until you get that nutrient or that upgrade in your consciousness, you're actually not supposed to leave. You have to get what you came for. And until you get it, until both partners get the thing they came for, which they may or may not be tracking consciously, you won't be able to break up. You have to get to the place where you're like, oh, I've learned how to stand up for myself. And now that I'm standing up for myself and my self-esteem is high enough, I realize this dance is not supportive to either their development or mine. And so I'm never trying to break up a couple. I never think they should break up. But I do ask them questions, the answers to which help them come to the realization of whether this relationship is doing what it's meant to do. And here's what I think a relationship is always meant to do. The purpose of a relationship is to help each individual fall more in love with themselves and their life. And if that's not happening reliably in the interactions, then the relationship is not doing its job. And so I don't tell them what to do. I just let them see that information. That is the point of a relationship. Not every moment I interact with my husband, I fall more in love with myself and my life, but more often than not. Okay, and all you need is 51% to round up to 100.
Yeah. How, when a couple is experiencing like conflict and they're like in it, and they're in a reactive dance, what are some tools that could be supportive for people to start to implement in their own experience with each other?
Well, first of all, not to have conflict as a problem. That's the first thing I want to teach my students and my clients. Conflict to me is like going to the gym. You go to the gym and you lift a weight and the muscle rips in tiny little ways because it can't support the weight, and then it grows back stronger. So every conflict is the relationship having tiny little rips that when they repair, it's stronger. So you don't want to avoid conflict.
Right.
You want to make sure you're not lifting too big a barbell where you like rip the muscle and damage it. So I'm trying to teach my students and my clients how to have conflict in a way that is developmentally useful so that both partners are able to alchemize the distance, the disconnection, the confusion into an upgrade in understanding of each other's perspective so that at the end they're like, you know what, that was some hard shit, but we're better off for having that conflict and resolving it. And I would never wish that we didn't have it. That's the place I want to get the conflict to. If you can extract enough benefit and understanding and wisdom about yourself, about your partner, about the dance, then it's worth it.
Yeah.
You want to make every conflict worth the suffering in terms of the educational upgrade you get from it.
Are there consistent themes that you see in conflicts with partners?
Yeah.
What's like the most consistent theme that you see?
Well, it's that main dichotomy I told you about earlier about selfing and othering. But let's see. You're asking what's the quintessential fight?
Yeah. Yeah, like what are we fighting about in the first place?
Honestly, if I could distill all fights down to, I don't even see conflict as a fight or like two people, in a knife fight where one wins and one loses. I see both people as actually on the same team and linked arm in arm, and they're fighting this third entity, which I call the misunderstanding. And so that misunderstanding, I've noticed with every couple who's in love, always tends to be the same thing. It's some form of I don't feel heard, seen, respected, understood, which all distill down to some version of I don't feel loved right now. And so all conflict really comes down to one or both partners not feeling seen, heard, respected, understood, not feeling loved right now.
Yeah.
And so that's usually a lie. That's usually not actually true. When I actually talk to each partner, they haven't actually stopped loving the other person. In fact, the love is still there. That's what's funding the drama. So what I see the fight is really about is each partner is using the other person to be their attachment figure to help calm and soothe and regulate their nervous system so they feel safe and okay. And they do it in different ways. One partner is wanting to hug and talk it out and let's commune, let's stop the fighting. That's them trying to use their partner kind of like a pacifier to soothe their dysregulated nervous system. And the other partner that's wanting space or avoidance, they are also wanting to use the absence of the relationship to regulate their nervous system. They don't know how to regulate in communion. And the other person doesn't know how to regulate in absence. And so what I come in to try to teach both partners to do is, this is what I teach everyone ultimately underneath all of my coaching, is a series of tools that allow them to generate safety in their own nervous system so that they don't need their partner to do anything to make them feel better.
What are the tools?
Well, we start with the most basic any breathing tool that they are used to. Like the simplest one I've ever learned is 3 to 5 deep breaths in through the nose with the long, slow exhale. Ideally, an exhale at least twice as long as the inhale.
Yep.
So just any breathing where the exhale is longer, that's the easiest one. And then any breathing that they have practice with, any yogic breathing, box breathing, whatever they have familiarity with that they can access in their toolkit. So breathing is the first thing because it mediates between, the mind and the body. But really what's happening when you're dysregulated? And dysregulated just means you're triggered, you have an amygdala hijack, you're flooded, anything, over 5 out of 10 I would call overwhelm. When you're dysregulated, what I think of it is as you've time traveled from the present moment as an adult with all your tools and technology. And dysregulation means you've time traveled back to a younger self, a regressed self, where you first had this wound and it never got healed. And so dysregulation is time travel. So I see self-regulation or emotional regulation or nervous system self-soothing or calming as time travel back to the present moment. And when you're back in the present moment, you have access to all your grown-up tools and files and things you learned at Landmark or things you learned in yoga class. When you've regressed to a younger version of yourself, usually under 10 years old, that 4-year-old version only has 4-year-old tools. And so oftentimes you'll see yourself in a fight and you or your partner is acting like a 4-year-old with grown-up words.
Right.
But you're basically having a tantrum and saying, you have to change and do something to make me feel better. If you need someone else in that world to do something to make you feel better, you are at the mercy of external circumstance. You have lost your power. You are no longer an adult. So what we have is 2 kids fighting over who's going to get their pacifier from the other. So what I'm trying to train them both is how to be an adult that takes radical responsibility for generating safety in their own body. The image that really nails this is imagine like you and your partner are fighting and you're asking them to say or do something to make you feel better, to stop the fight. You feel like you're drowning in the ocean and you're drowning and your partner's there on the boat and they have the life jacket beside them and you're saying, will you just throw me the life jacket? And you're thinking, if they just hugged me, if they just gave me 5 minutes, I could feel safe. But they don't. They don't throw you the life jacket. And sometimes we think they're sitting there standing maniacally going, ha, 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 I'm not going to throw you the life jacket. But the truth is, if your partner is seeing you struggle and suffering and they're not throwing the life jacket, it's only because of one reason. It's because they are also drowning on the other side of the boat. But their drowning looks different than yours. And so whenever my husband isn't doing the thing I most want in the moment, I just assume, he can't because of his history, his wounding, his toolkit. And so shit, man, he's not coming to save me. What do I need to do? I need to learn how to swim to shore because he's drowning and he can't help me. Swimming to shore is self-regulation, generating safety in your body for yourself.
So how does a person come into actually getting to the root and communicating to that child version of themselves and actually providing the care and providing the support? And, because I think intellectually, those ideas are great as long as you're in like a stabilized, homeostatic, everything's chill place.
Yeah.
But the moment that a person becomes reactive and
Yeah.
taps back into that 4-year-old or 7-year-old
Yeah.
or whatever,
What are you going to do?
all of that shit goes out the window.
Out the window. Exactly. There's
So
a
how
lizard
does-
driving the plane.
How does an individual or a couple start to actually create the space to be able to provide whatever it is that child version of themselves needs to, when that moment arises, that child version of themselves is able to feel supported?
So you're talking about the child version of themselves. I just want to tie that in, that when you're dysregulated, there's a young part of you that is needing soothing, and we're asking someone outside to give us soothing because that's what we needed when we were a kid. And to the extent to which our parents did or didn't give it to us is the extent to which we can do it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so our new partner, who's our attachment figure, coded as the same as our parent, we're expecting in an entitled way our partner to do that for them, do that for us. So what we're really trying to create is an internal attachment figure where your internal grown-up self can take care of and soothe the young part of you that's scared, sad, angry, overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that people often don't know how to do that for themselves. So they need a reference experience or a demo. Someone to show, a friend, a therapist, a coach that holds space for their scared, angry self. And they see what it feels like to have space held for them, the internal experience, what kind of rapport. And after seeing that a few times, I try to teach my clients and my students how to do this for their own younger self. Now, we can go into how I do that, but I first want to say, when you're triggered, all these tools and technologies go out the window. So what I encourage people to do is to start practicing regulating and breathing and doing any technology that calms your nervous system, not when you're triggered. Literally when you're just like 1 out of 10 irritated, 2 out of 10 frustrated, someone forgot something. Start practicing in those moments. I practice self-regulation when I'm filling my water bottle. I practice it when I'm having a pee, when I'm waiting at the cashier in line. Anytime I have neutral, idle time, I'm just attending to my breath, scanning the inside of my body. I'm just practicing. Because if you practice with small weights, then you'll have the instinct to reach for the weights when you're in higher and higher levels of trigger.
Yeah.
So you have to start small because no one's going to lift 50 pounds right away. So I teach my clients to calibrate their emotional experience. At first, it's either 0 or 10, and then I have them calibrate higher than 5, lower than 5. And then as you get more granular, you'll start to be able to know, I'm sad right now, 2.5 out of 10 or 7 out of 10. Your partner doesn't know how sad you are. When you say I'm sad, they don't know if it's 2 or 10. So I think calibration is really important for your own sense of where you are in the schema and teaching your partner. So in terms of how do we help take care of our little child, I learned this from Thich Nhat Hanh. I was breaking up with someone and I was in Thailand and I got this book. And he said, when you have an emotion, it was sadness he was talking about, hold your emotion as if it was a child in your arms and just rock it. And just the action, I'm a woman and so mothering is natural to me. The idea of holding my own emotion with reverence and dignity and appreciation and honoring it like a child rather than being ashamed or trying to push it out or repress it or make it wrong. That's the first beginning stage of connecting with your inner child or that part that's dysregulated.
Right.
It needs to know that its sadness, its anger, its fear is safe, welcomed, and has intelligence. And so one of the things I'm always doing with my clients is helping them have reverence for their own emotion by going first and saying, hey, I notice your sadness. It might be wanting to say something. I notice that you're trying to deny it or argue against it. Like, I'm basically a defense lawyer for the marginalized emotion in the client. That's how I think of it.
I love that. You mentioned you were talking to my girlfriend before this, who you'd worked with in the past. The trust was the thing that you were talking with her years ago. You guys had worked together. You said there was updated tools that you have around trust. Presently, how does a relationship cultivate and nurture trust within the dyad, between the two people?
I love the word trust, first because it has us in the middle.
Yeah.
So I've noticed that the fastest way to build trust with someone is when they feel that the relationship, the dynamic or the conversation has us as primary. So trust has us in the middle. It's oriented around us. So if I'm talking to you and you feel that I'm putting priority on the us over my agenda or my desired outcome, the minute you feel I have my agenda or my desired outcome is more important than this, you won't trust me. Okay? So the way you build trust is to make the primacy on the relationship. And not just the relationship between us, but my relationship to myself. So I noticed that when people say they don't trust another person, what they're actually saying, if we could stretch it out, is I don't trust my own ability to cope if they do something I don't like. They don't trust their ability to hang and be able to be with and act in response to a disappointment, a breached expectation, a behavior that they don't like. So what I'm realizing is all trust breaches with other is actually an inability to trust your own ability to cope with that future situation. So what I try to help my clients do is build the ability to cope with any goddamn situation as much as possible so that they're not afraid of their ability to dance with it. Now, yes, can people break trust, have an affair, cheat, say they're going to do something and not do it? Yes, there's usually a dance that creates these trust breaches, but I notice that it's usually on both sides. Usually when someone says, I don't trust you, they're saying, I'm good, something's wrong with you. And what I like to bring back to the conversation is there probably is work on that side for the person to keep their word, live into their promises, keep their agreements. There's probably work there. And there's probably work over here for you to make it easier for the other person to be honest with you. Because a lot of times people say, this person's lying to me. They say this, but they do this. And I'm like, well, is there anything you're doing on your end that makes it hard for them to come to you and be transparent and honest? When someone is consistently experiencing deceit or deception, it's almost always a tango dance. And both sides have something to upgrade. But you need both to upgrade to get the trust to be present again.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the more resourced and stable a person is within themselves, the greater capacity that they have to be able to receive whatever information or whatever expectation that might be missed or lost. If they have the resources within themselves to be able to hold that, they become a more trustful person.
Yeah, and more trusting.
And more trusting.
And say someone breaks.
Yeah, but also with because I think it's interesting, like the ability to be able to communicate to a partner something that is like hard or you're like scared to communicate. If you don't believe that they have the capacity within themselves to be able to hold that, it suddenly you have to close up.
Yeah. And our job in partnership is to see our partner as big, strong, resilient, capable. I would never want my partner mollycoddling me. Oh, I can't tell this to Annie. She can't handle it. She's going to lose her shit. Who wants their partner thinking about them like that? Everybody wants their partner to think, this is going to be hard, but they're a badass. They're powerful. They'll be able to hold it. We'll get through this together. This is going to edify them, right? That's how we want to be seen, as powerful.
I love that. If trust is broken in whatever capacity in a relationship, what are the steps to start to recultivate that?
Even the words trust is broken. It's really someone's disappointed and an expectation wasn't met. Even the idea that trust is broken already pits one as the goodie and the baddie. So I like to stay out of that.
Oh, I like that.
But let me start with something I actually heard Tony Robbins say once. You cannot repair with words something that was broken with actions or something that was acted behaviorally. So oftentimes something goes wrong and we try to explain or, charm our way out of it or apologize our way out of it. And sometimes the breakdown requires a shift in your whole behavior to repair or compensate or make good again. So if you've done something that you know is at odds with your own value and your partner is calling you out on it, okay? And that's usually why partners have frustration, is that you are acting in a way that's not even aligned with your own values. Then they're doing their job by highlighting it to you and saying, hey, you claim this, these are your values that you aspire towards, and there's a gap between your aspirational your values and how you're behaving. Your partner's job is to help bridge that gap. And so, what's the question you asked me?
Regaining trust.
Regaining trust.
Recultivating trust. If the expectations have been.
So one is, if you feel like you acted in a way that you're not proud of and you're willing to own it, then it's on you to ask the other person, is there anything I can do to repair this? What would help bring the relationship back into balance? And the person who's being asked this, your job is to not go grab for every possible thing in the future that you wanted. Your job is to actually look for the lowest thing that would actually feel like an earnest repair action from the other person. And the other person actually needs developmentally to do something to repair the trust. And I don't know what that is. It's something you collaborate on together. But, I heard this from a teacher once. He said, trust cannot be earned. It can only be granted. And so at any point in time, you're not trying to earn back trust, but you get to decide as an individual. Will you grant yourself trust? Will you grant your partner trust? And it takes courage to grant trust. And that's why a lot of people aren't able to do it. Because you have to keep, I don't want you to trust without verifying. Okay, so you want to trust something someone says and then always verify later to check if there's a space between what the person claims and then what they're able to follow through with. I think trust has different domains. There's I trust someone's intention. I could trust my dad's intention, but I might not trust his competence to fix my laptop. And so which domain of trust are you feeling is missing? Because I want to make sure we're not conflating them. And almost all the time where we're not trusting someone's intention, it's actually a competence that's missing. We were talking earlier about a gentleman who ghosts people and doesn't call back when you're reaching out.
Yeah.
My guess is he doesn't have the tools to reach out in a way that doesn't feel uncomfortable. So he just doesn't do it.
Right.
It's not that he has malintention or he thinks poorly of you.
Yeah.
It's actually a missing competence.
Yeah. It's like an internal overwhelm that just goes to zero.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I can't do anything about it. Yeah. Within trust, is there anything else any other particular tools that come to mind for you for cultivating that? Like something I've heard that I thought was interesting is in order for someone to be trustworthy, you have to trust them. I think that's an interesting thing of the way that there's actually a psychological term for it called the Pygmalion effect. Essentially we paint people's character upon them based off of our projection or our perception of them.
Totally.
And so if you're in a relationship with someone and you're anticipating them to hurt you in some capacity, it means you're almost injecting those character affects into them in a way because they feel untrusted.
Yeah.
And so then you're subconsciously planting those characteristics into the person. So is it more of an internal game to cultivate trust in a relationship? Is it a group dyad thing?
Well, that's why I said the trust that you don't have in them is really you don't trust yourself to be able to cope with future divergent behaviors.
Right.
What you were saying,
how do you cultivate that trust within yourself?
You tend to trust yourself in direct proportion to how much your behavior matches your own values. So the smaller the gap between your behavior and your values, the higher your self-esteem. Self-esteem has two parts, according to Nathaniel Branden, who wrote the book on self-esteem. Self-esteem has two parts. The first part is believing that you deserve to be happy. Just that. Worthiness, deserving. Second part of self-esteem is trusting that your future self will be able to cope with what life brings it. So it's about coping and resilience. And you need to have both to have strong self-esteem. Usually someone has strong in one and not in the other, so you have to develop your underdeveloped part. But in order to build your ability to trust your future self and someone else, you have to start cultivating I can handle whatever sensations come up. If my partner betrays me or something bad happens, can I cope and can I take an indicated action that supports my future self? If someone is continuously behaving in a way that hurts me, do I trust myself to take myself out of that relationship dynamic, or do I keep myself in that situation? It's almost like, am I taking care of my future self? Am I loving my future self? Am I creating environmental conditions for my future self to flourish? Or am I keeping them trapped in painful, suffering-laden dynamics?
Yeah.
So it always comes back down to the self-trust. But in terms of cultivating more trust, I think acting, what you just said, you have to trust them for them to be trustworthy. I think what that means is when you grant trust, it's the same thing. When you grant trust, the person has an opportunity to show up. That's their only opportunity. They may not show up, but the highest likelihood of them showing up is by you operating from that perspective, which takes courage if you've been hurt in the past. Because the instinct to react when you've been hurt in the past is to close your heart, to get cynical, to get bitter, and to become, disbelieving. It's our job as human beings, as lovers, to continuously generate faith from zero, not from the past experience, not from the current evidence. Faith is generated by traveling into a future that you imagine is so good, true, and beautiful, it cannot help but come true. and then generating from that future backwards possibility, courage, opportunity. If you try to extrapolate from the past or current behavior of your partner or yourself, you're just going to keep extrapolating whatever's transpired and contaminating the future.
Yeah.
So faith has to be generated from the audacity to believe in something that should happen.
What about characteristics of a partner that you find challenging, that they also find challenging, that you collectively would like to integrate, grow, change, shift, whatever? What's the best path towards creating lasting shift and change within characteristics that maybe both of you collectively are like, yeah, I would like to grow through this?
Okay, there's two parts. First, if you want your partner, it's so counterintuitive, but if you want your partner to change something, you have to get to the place where you don't need them to change it.
Yeah, you accept them as they're at.
Something in
or
them.
else they'll become subconsciously defensive.
Well, the pattern in them is going, oh, they don't love me. I ain't changing until you love me just as I am.
Yeah.
And when they feel you love them just as they are, then they get the resource to climb the Mount Everest of doing the pattern change. And there's something kind of understandable about that.
Yeah.
So that's the first part. You have to actually, I had a client once ask me, like, what if I don't love my partner exactly as they are? What if I love their potential? And I'm like, you can't love their potential. Yeah. You have to love them exactly as they are. And I asked the client secretly, if their partner never changed, would you stay with them? And if the answer isn't yes, then I don't know if they're in love with this person. They're in love with a fantasy of some possibility. They're not in love with this actual human. And the other partner can feel this. And in order for them to grow into the actualized version that you hold as a potential, they have to feel loved as is. It's strange. They have to feel loved as is in order to ascend to that possibility. So that's the first piece. If you're wanting to change, you have to get to the place where you don't need them to change. Which means you have to be able to cope with however they dance if they don't change. And is the suffering, is who they are as a magnificent partner worth the suffering?
And also, could there be some aspects of what you can't accept about that person being a projection from yourself?
Well, that's where we're going next. Yeah. Well, in order to accept them exactly as they are, you have to do all your shadow work.
Yeah.
So that's what catches your shadow work. And for the person who's being asked to change, what usually changes a partner organically, by inspiring them, is your genuine heartbreak articulated with no shame, blame, and make wrong. If you can bring to your partner with an open kimono the owie, the fear, the hurt, the confusion, without any finger pointing, shaming, or blaming, and it's kind of like you come to them with blood on your hands. You're like, I have blood on my hands. Will you help me? Will you bring some Neosporin and a Band-Aid? And they do, and they go help. And then they ask what happened, and you go, oh, I cut it on a knife that was sticking up in the dishwasher. You don't say, you left the goddamn knife in the dishwasher sticking up. That's why I got cut. You let them come to that conclusion. Oh, I got cut. Is the knife in the dishwasher sticking up? And then they go, I left the knife sticking up in the dishwasher. Oh. And then they upgrade their dance at not leaving the knife up in the dishwasher because they don't want you to be in more pain. But if the pain comes with any you shoulda, coulda, woulda, blamey, shamey, they're so busy defending that they can't even feel empathy for the blood that they inadvertently caused.
Why does it feel so good to blame and shoulda, woulda, coulda?
Why does it feel so good?
I mean, maybe that's just speaking from a person that's like a toxic, misaligned human being. But there's sometimes a sensation where you're like, it's like this visceral feeling of like, you want to kind of be like,
yeah,
you did this.
Yeah.
Like,
because if you don't, if I stop you from doing that, if that's bankrupted, what do you have to do? You are forced to become agentic and see how you create it. You can't blame it outside now. You have to become causal in the situation. You have to go and see, how did I co-create this suboptimal outcome? Which means you have to go and work on all your dancing tango patterns. And everybody wants to avoid doing that. They want to just go, you need to change. I don't need to change. But in my work with couples for all these years, I've never seen a crazy in one partner that isn't matched by an equal crazy in the other. So whatever crazy I think my husband's doing, and he has a lot, what I've learned now is there is exactly equal and opposite crazy in me that is driving him mad. So I never think he's net more crazy than me. And I think I'm uniquely able to perceive that because I work with so many couples and I get to see both the crazies and I'm like, oh my God, isn't that interesting? It's always equal. Always. So what I do now when I bump into someone's crazy is I go, where is the piece of crazy in me that's secretly dancing with theirs under deck, cheek to cheek.
That's really good.
So I don't spend any time trying to blame shame. I go, okay, where's the piece of me that gets a payoff? Where's the piece of me that's dancing with this? And I go work on that, call my coaches, call my friends, work on that. And when I change that tango move in myself, I get theirs for free. You got a 2-for-1. And if you are continuously upgrading yourself and you see no change on that side, you will eventually graduate. You will eventually feel like, oh, I'm not falling more in love with myself in my life in this relationship. And that person, you might dissolve out of the relationship. But honestly, I think all relationships graduate when it's the right time for both. Usually one's leading and the other person's kind of grumbling and trailing behind. But eventually they will see at some point in the future, that one was my partner was the one that saw that this wasn't right for both of us, and they had the courage to break it or move on.
There's Ram Dass has a bit about like something along the lines of the best thing that I can do for you is work on myself, and the best thing you can do for me is work on yourself. I feel like if you could have that dynamic in a relationship where you're really actively doing exactly what you're saying of the things that are bothering you within the other and the places where you're blaming and that and kind of like foregoing responsibility.
Yeah.
If both partners were able to engage in that way of having like their first knee-jerk response, or maybe their knee-jerk response isn't that, but at least like there's a soon after response of like, where am I in this? And how can I just actively work on myself to see if perhaps I can lead the dance?
Yeah, and I don't like the word work on myself because it suggests that something's wrong and broken, and I'm meticulous about words.
Well, I appreciate
so it's
that.
more like what part of me is getting pushed away and marginalized and not loved up? What part of me am I shaming privately? And, we're talking about blaming and criticism is often part of blame. Every blame or criticism is a request in disguise. And so how can we clean off the shame, blame, and make wrong? Every should is a could with shame smeared on top. So how can I clean off the shame and make my request? Hey, could you please put the dishes in the dishwasher when you're finished with them? It really makes me feel loved up when I walk into the kitchen and the sink is clean. And I know you're a part of the team and you want to help the household. How can I take my WTF, what the fuck stance, which is a shamey, blamey criticism, and transmute it into what I call an MLK stance? Stands for Martin Luther King. If anybody ever had a reason to be what the fuck, it was him, but he didn't. He said, I have a dream, and he inspired and enrolled a nation into that possibility. So if you can take all your WTFs and alchemize them into MLKs, you can literally invite and enroll your partner into an upgraded behavior by sharing your heartbreak, your owie, the possibility of the relationship that's available if they were to take on that shift. And I'll love you either way, even if you don't take it on. So what we do is we usually bankrupt. We're like, well, I'm not going to love you unless you change. And we think that helps.
Yeah.
But they need to feel loved as is in order to make the change. So that's one thing around blame.
I love that.
Yeah. There's another thing I was going to say about it, but yeah, a criticism is basically, I love you, I believe in you, I know you can do better. And I'm standing for this version of you that lives into the values that I know you stand for in your...
Yeah, how did you call, like, when we mess up, it's like a fumbled attempt at love. How did you say that?
Well, usually when our partner does something that hurts us, it's a bumbled attempt to love us, but according to their values. It didn't match up to our values.
Yeah. So,
I'm always looking for how is love hidden in the thing that this person is doing.
It's a really helpful perspective. Because I think that's oftentimes, and particularly like one of the most like triggering, charging things probably would be a sensation of like my partner is criticizing me, and then I interpret that as like they don't actually love me, or like whatever stories start spinning within me. But if you're able to maintain that on both sides of, like they're actually just fumbling an attempt here where they really are trying to love the way that they know how to.
In a broken, bumbled way.
In a broken, bumbled way. Yeah. And be able to have that. And I think something else that's helpful is like looking at adults as children, because it's pretty much what we are, particularly if we get even a little reactive.
A bar chart. So when I meet someone, I see them as little bars. And there's parts where they're 80-year-old sage, wise leader. There's parts where they're an adolescent teenager. There's part they're a 4-year-old tantrumer. And so when I meet someone and I befriend them, I just see where are they a wise sage, where are they an adolescent, and I just love them as a totality. And I'm supporting when I bump into their 4-year-old, I treat it like the 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And if I met a 4-year-old, there's certain ways I'd relate to them that sometimes we go, oh, well, my partner's not a 4-year-old. They're an adult. Well, in this area, they are a 4-year-old. They've had arrested development. You're literally bumping into their 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And so there needs to be at least one adult in the room if one's a 4-year-old. So can you stay regulated and stay in your adult self?
What is...
Oh, I wanted to say one more thing about criticism.
Yeah,
when there's criticism and blame, so there's two parts. The criticizer, your job is to become like MLK, Martin Luther King, and inspire and enroll your partner to live into this version of them that they hired you to help become. And if you're the one getting criticized, your job is to look for the commitment behind the complaint. What greatness are they standing for? What value are they holding me to account for? And if you ask someone criticizing or blaming you, you just say, hey, you're smart. I know you love me. What is the commitment that is driving your frustration? What is the thing you see that's possible for me? And they'll restate their whole grumble in an MLK style. So when my husband's criticizing me, I'm literally going, okay, what is the thing that he's standing for that would upgrade me? And here's what I do. If the thing he's standing for would make me a more extraordinary version of myself, then he's doing exactly what I hired him to do. Now, he may have paltry bedside manner. I might say, hey, I really love what you're standing for, but could you do it in a softer tone? Could you do it with less criticism? So I can ask for an upgrade in bedside manner later, but I actually want to make sure I get the golden nugget that's hidden behind the complaint, because who else is going to tell this to me? No friend or person on the street is ever going to be able to reflect this back to me. So it's actually a gift. So I'm trying to tolerate the suboptimal bedside manner and look for the golden nugget of truth. But I don't look for the golden nugget of truth until I've remembered my own dignity and self-esteem. If I'm feeling like a loser and then I'm trying to see what's true in what he's saying, then I'm sending myself deeper into loserville. I have to come back to, I'm an amazing wife, I'm a great woman, I'm an amazing partner, and how do I upgrade what's already a magnum opus? How do I polish the Mona Lisa rather than get out of loserville?
What do you see missing in couples' sexual relationships? What are some factors that can improve a couple's sexual relationship?
Well, one thing I've noticed that people unconsciously believe it's someone else's job to make them turned on. When you're in love and you're in a relationship, your job is to generate your own turn on for your partner. So it's not just, do I feel turned on right now on a Wednesday night? Every time you interact with your partner, you should be scanning and hunting for moments of their genius, intelligence, creativity, beauty, and be putting them in the bank account of your regard for them. And when it's time to be romantic or in any interaction, if you're not feeling great in the relationship, can you withdraw from the bank account something you admire, appreciate, or love about them, and then alchemize that into a turn-on? I'm always scanning through my husband's behavior and words and action and how he looks when he crosses the room. I'm always scanning for something that I can use to create a turn-on. Is he an Abercrombie and Fitch model? No. But if I want to make this relationship last a lifetime, I need to be able to see his sexiness in the way he thinks and talks and moves. And it's my job to generate my sexual intrigue towards my partner. If that's waning, shame on me. So that's something most people aren't tackling. I think date nights are really important. If you have busy lives, you have family, you have kids, you need to get that shit on the calendar. You can't just wait for spontaneous. We have date night every Thursday. It's religious. At some point in the evening, we're going to have sex. At least once a week, we have that date night. It could be more, but I think you need to make sure that that's happening, and you have to prioritize it. And I think also bids for sexual connection. One partner might make a bid to the other, an intimation, let's have a sexual connection. And I think within 24 hours of that bid, if you were requested, your job is to either complete on the bid, like reinitiate a sexual connection, or talk to them about why you aren't able to. It's on you. If someone made a bid, that took a lot of courage. It's your job to say, okay, I wasn't feeling it last night. How about tomorrow morning or tonight? Or listen, I just had surgery. I'm out of commission for 3 days. And I want to just lead into, I actually see sexual connection as a nutrient, as a food that is the physical requirement, one of the physical requirements of the relationship success. It's not something that's a luxury. It's like having a baby. In a relationship, you got two co-parents and the relationship is a baby. And anyone who's had a kid knows that at 3 a.m. in the morning, you don't want to wake up and feed the baby, but you have to feed the baby. The child needs to eat. The relationship needs to fuck. It needs food. And if either one of you are depriving sexuality from the relationship, it's like starving a child, and it will eventually dwindle. And so, but I'm not in the mood. Well, you need to generate yourself being in the mood. And if there's something in the way, like a grumble or an irresolved conflict, get it resolved because it's literally atrophying the foundation of the relationship. I think of all beings as having physical layer, emotional, social layer, and then intellectual, cognitive. And so your relationship and evolution evolved in that process, physical, emotional, intellectual. So the relationship needs to have its physical needs met before it can have emotional connection and resonance. And so a lot of people are like, oh, I don't feel connected to my partner. Well, can you create an opportunity to feel that connection? And sometimes having the sex produces the connection.
Right.
So I have a pet grumble about people who hold an embargo on sex. So there's usually one partner that wants to connect sexually and one that's holding the bottleneck. They don't realize they're often doing it, but they're often doing it out of a sense of powerlessness in the relationship at large. So they don't feel powerful in the relationship. So their little chimp mind goes, well, I don't feel power anywhere else. This is the only place I have power. And then they wield the power there. And so the antidote to that is to help make sure that that person is feeling powerful throughout the relationship so they don't have to grab it in this one area. And this leads to something you were talking about earlier about power dynamics in a couple.
Sure.
I really feel like a couple that's going to last long term has to be like two wings on one bird. If you have one wing that's dominating the other wing, it'll eventually veer into the ground. So they have to have equal power, not at all times, but the dynamic transfer of power back and forth has to be going. Otherwise, there's a net iniquity. That means one wing is stronger than the other and it won't be able to fly.
How does a couple fluidly, effectively transfer that power back and forth?
First, I think the couple has to become conscious that there is power dynamics. So they have to know that when they're sulking in the corner, they're actually trying to wield power. And instead of having it come from an unconscious, compulsive place, to be consciously tracking, wow, I'm feeling powerless right now, and I want to have power over you. So that I'm not going to talk to you for 3 hours because I want to wield power. Like calling the shot is actually way more sophisticated than just doing it.
Sure.
So that's becoming aware of the power dynamics and there's no time in a relationship where you're no longer in power dynamics. There's only, we're conscious of it now and when you're unconscious of it. So you want to become conscious of the power dynamics. And if you're in a relationship where you feel like you're more powerful than the other, then it's not going to last. A long-term relationship only lasts when both equal partners see each other as collaborative units. And we can talk about collaboration, but collaboration is what conflict aspires to be. Conflict is a collaboration trying to happen. Two different perspectives, two different value sets trying to tessellate. And it's not happening effectively, so a conflict arises. And if you stay with a conflict and you work through collapse and coercion, which is the enemy of collaboration, then you will eventually get to a collaboration. All conflicts will end up in a collaboration if you stay with it long enough, if you get support. So that's what I do. I basically turn conflicts into collaborations where both perspectives get dignified and honored and a new emergent possibility comes out of the conversation that wasn't available before. And that's better than if either person have gotten their own way. That's the whole purpose of a collaboration.
I love that. How does money come into that conversation and relationship? Because that obviously could be a very clear and is a very clear like power dynamic.
Yeah, so I might say something that's kind of controversial, but I'm going to say it. From an evolutionary standpoint, two people come together in commitment to pair bond and have a child. That's the evolutionary stance. And so the whole game of being in love that I stand for is to equip the parents to be maximally effective with a child. And so if you have one partner that's making all the money and one that's a dependent, while that, they can agree upon that and it can look like it's working, I don't know if the dependent partner will ever fully feel free and autonomous in that dynamic.
Sure.
Just like if you work for a boss, are you ever going to tell the boss what you really think? Are you ever going to stand up for your needs?
Yeah.
And so it builds in a structural inequity. And it's, of course, there's times where the mother is pregnant and raising the child. And so there's times where you might consciously, collectively choose where one partner works and the other doesn't. But the partner that's not making money or working, both of them have to know that they can make money if they choose and if they want, because then it's a choice. It's not out of the inability or desperation. The image I give like this is like, say a woman is on a date with a man at a restaurant and you see them and he's paid for the bill. You can imagine that woman could be someone who can't pay her rent. She can't afford anything. She's dependent on the man to pay for everything. And that's one dynamic where she has no choice but to let him pay. Okay? That's one dynamic. Then you might have a couple where he pays half and she pays half and they're like, splitting the bill. So they're like equal. And then there's a more advanced dynamic where the woman is a CEO, could buy the whole goddamn restaurant. But she's choosing to be in her feminine and to let the man pay for it, not out of desperation, not because she can't, but she chooses. Yeah. And at any moment, she could pay for it. Both of those scenarios, the first and the last, look the same to a camera. He's paying for the bill. He opens the taxi door. But on the inside of both of their minds, they're completely different. Yeah. One's more advanced, one's less advanced. And so I want to inspire partners, women, men, to cultivate the capacity to be able to take care of their lower Maslow situation, their dynamics, because if the other partner died, God forbid, we want to know that the other partner's cross-trained enough that they could handle the raising of the children. I don't think a partner can ever feel fully relaxed if they think, well, if I died, my partner wouldn't be able to hang, wouldn't be able to take care of the family. Yep. So I think you don't have to have the same earning potential, but both partners need to know that either of them could handle this family if one of them was lost. I think that's how you get real collaboration.
If one of the partners is in a place where they're like looking to sort out that Maslow, the bottom foundational parts, how can that dynamic succeed? Like, how can the other partner show up for them the best way? How can the partner that's lower in the Maslow situation show up for themselves?
Or struggling financially.
And also show up for the other partner in the best ways and like find that balance and that kind of like equipoise where it feels
well, the partner
useful.
That's struggling to pay their rent or manage their own lower Maslow requirements, there's a part of them that kind of likes being taken care of and not having to worry about it. There's the young kid part. Just take care of me. Just wipe my bum. Just do everything for me, okay? Sure. But there's also a part of them that hired their partner to stand for their greatness, to cultivate their ability to cope and create outcomes in the world. And so you want to track, are you weaning someone onto you? Are you creating a codependent dynamic where they're never able to find their own 2 feet? Because not only does that undermine their development, it also makes them a less powerful partner if you were to create a family together.
Sure.
So what the earning partner could do, which might take some courage and audacity and can almost feel like they're being unloving, is to remember this partner, I admire them, I love their resilience, I fell in love with their ability to create realities, and to see them big and to stand fiercely for their development and growth in the area that they're struggling. You support from the side, and support, the way I think of support is you only want to support up to the level where they can take it over. So you give the minimum amount of support possible. When my daughter was young and she would bring to me a package, my husband taught me, don't open the whole package for her. Open just the edge of the plastic. Let her rip the rest of it. So I'm doing the minimum amount, so I'm weaning her on to higher self-esteem, higher skill set. So that's the opportunity to create a safe developmental context or container for the other person to build their esteem. Nobody on this planet who can't pay their rent or pay for their food is proud of themselves. None of them feel like I could handle a family, not triumphantly. So they don't have to be a millionaire. They just have to be able to take care of the dreams that they want. And you can support and help from the side. And so then the person who's being asked to develop their earning potential, they may feel betrayed by this sudden like, hey, I'm not going to take care of everything. I want to help support you in finding your own 2 feet. But that's their younger self going, I want to be rescued. I want to be saved. But if they tap into their deeper, higher self, and you catch them later on in life when someone stopped funding something and supported them in finding their own financial stability, they will eventually look back and go, thank you. Thank you for weaning me off that dance, because the self-esteem I have right now moving through reality is so much higher. It might take a while, and they might be grumbly at the beginning because you're weaning them just like a baby. You're weaning them off the bottle. Yeah. But I think ultimately we're always standing in romance for the maximal adulting of both partners, not dependencies. You don't want two popsicle sticks leaning on each other. You want two twin stars that are autonomous that then choose to rotate and dance together for as long as it's useful.
That's really beautiful. Is there anything else?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a million things else. But, I mean, let me think. Yeah. I mean, one idea that I don't get asked about often that I want to just offer to talk about is jealousy.
Oh, good.
Yeah?
Please.
So there's a common understanding in our culture that jealousy is weakness, insecurity, wimpiness, and means something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And as a student of biology and evolutionary biology, nothing happens in the communal psyche that doesn't have an adaptive utility. So for jealousy to be so pervasive in our human minds, it has to have an adaptive advantage. And what I've noticed in studying other animals and mammals in pair bonds, jealousy is an indicator that jealousy is something that protects the primacy of the pair bond. Okay? So the feeling of jealousy is an attempt to make sure the relationship is guarded from interventions from other partners. And so there's something really beautiful about that garden, that I literally see myself as the guardian of my client's relationship. If either of them get in the way of that relationship's health, I'm going to call them on it lovingly. So I see the beautiful commitment behind jealousy, and so I want to take the bad rap off it. But what I do want to say is when someone's feeling jealousy, this is my empirical observation, when one partner is feeling jealous, that jealousy it's usually based on some kernel of actual breach of devotion. But the story that the jealousy is running is paranoid and over exaggerated. Yeah, so what I mean by is like, you know when a pearl is made in a clam or an oyster, there needs to be a grain of sand in the clam for the pearl to form, always. In fact, the pearl is the clam's response to an irritant. And so when you get a pearl, in the center of every pearl is a tiny grain of sand. So when someone's jealous, there is a grain of sand of truth in their jealousy. Most of it is just their paranoia and their insecurity and their fear, the story that they're telling. But no one I've noticed is ever jealous unless there is some little behavioral grain of sand in their partner's actions that are not fully devotional, not fully standing for the signaling of this relationship is impenetrable, leaky sexual energy, trying to get attention from other people to supplement their low self-esteem at the cost of the devotional connection. So the jealousy is indicating that there is a breach in devotion in the other partner. And so I'm always trying to help that the one who's being accused of upgrading the way they love so that the pair bond is more resilient and powerful in the world. And then I'm also trying to help the jealous partner see that while there is a grain of truth, 80% of it is actually just made up worries, usually in response to the other person going, there's nothing going on here. There's nothing going on here. So if you're jealous, don't trust your story, but trust that the jealousy is picking up on something and stand for the upgrade in devotion. See if you can find what, the person who's being accused, like, I'm feeling jealous around you, there's usually an upgrade for them.
Yeah.
There's a way to behave with your partner in public and private that would have them go, nope, I feel your investment in us.
Yeah, right.
And so there's an intelligence to jealousy that we don't want to throw out.
Yeah, the jealousy can be loved as well.
Can be loved and actually interviewed for its intelligence. If your partner is jealous, then you're doing something that's suboptimal in the full tilt devotion game. There's something. So let's look for it. You're probably not doing it intentionally. It's probably something like, if a guy's coming home late from work and the wife's worried, oh, he's having an affair with the secretary, he might not be having an affair with the secretary. He might be smoking weed in the back with his
there's something.
Guys.
Right.
There's something she's picking up on, but it's usually not the story. So I don't trust the story jealousy tells, but I trust that there's something there.
It's very important to tend to the stories and tend to coming back to a place of balance or center within the self, coming back to that like core sand kernel within your selfhood to cleanse the stories. Because I think what happens with me or can happen in general is like the story births a story, births a story, births a story. And you can be so spun out on the story is that like the reality that a person may be living in is actually based on like air at this point.
Yeah. Well,
and there is a kernel back at the root.
Yeah.
But we live in our stories for so long. That's what I think that's something that, I think meditation could be one example as like a little cleansing.
Totally.
Of like maybe for the first 5 minutes, you're just wrapped up in stories and it's this cacophonous mess inside your head. And like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. I got to do that. And I don't have time for this. And then you'll sit for 7 minutes and maybe it's chills out a little bit. And if you can make it to 15 minutes, suddenly like you might have a moment like, oh, this is actually not that bad.
Yeah, so the like meditation is actually inviting them back into their soma, in their body, into their breath, and out of the cognitive story.
Yeah.
What I've noticed is story is generated by an attempt to avoid sensations in the body. So you feel a feeling.
That's good.
They're scary, they're angry, they're overwhelming. And so you bootstrap an escape hatch from your soma into a narrative, a story about the feeling.
Wow.
A story is an attempt to dodge a feeling in the body. Wow. So meditation, breathing, regulation are all come back into the body, hang out here where the real kernel of truth is. But no one wants to be with that terrifying, dysregulated feeling. We learned as kids, if something's scary, dissociate into a fantasy land, into playing with toys, into something outside of our body. And as we get older, that dissociation works so well that we keep doing it, except instead of playing with toy trucks and dolls and fantasy world, we dissociate into our cognitive narrative, which requires reasons, justifications, shames, blames, and make wrong. Either shaming the other or shaming yourself. All that story, which I call the lounge of why, is custom crafted to dissociate from the soma. So as soon as you come back into the soma, you actually solve the root issue, which the story was an attempt to dodge.
Wow. And so living in a culture that is largely disassociated just, from since elementary school, from the soma, it would probably be a higher proclivity or likelihood of us having the tendency of escaping the body because the body's not that accessible compared to maybe you might visit like Senegal or something like that where it's like a common theme every day. It's like, oh, it's sunset. We're going to play drums and watch the sunset. And we're going to dance and we're going to get weird and we're going to take our shirts off and we're going to like be in our bodies. We're going to be barefoot and we're going to feel the exposure of the sun on our skin and we're going to climb trees and we're going to wrestle. I would presume if there was some way, I'm sure there's been research around that in some capacity, but the likelihood of escaping the body in an embodied culture would probably be lower, I would imagine.
Yeah, and there's less story. More what happens in those embodied cultures is people share their feeling, but in order to share a feeling, you have to be in your feeling.
And the feeling sometimes looks like anger. It looks like, it might be like shaking fists or shaking somebody. Or
exactly.
Like
and there's no problem with anger. The problem with anger that we mostly have here is anger comes with blame.
Right.
But they're not the same thing. You can deconflate blame and anger, and you can just have anger. If you watch a child, they don't even know to blame. They're just angry that their Lego tower fell. Right. They're just pure anger, and there's something beautiful about pure anger. The problem with anger is when people conflate it with blame. So it's not just, I'm angry because, insert story, shame, blame, make wrong, reason, justifications. And the blame is an attempt to not have to be with the visceral vibration that's very uncomfortable of anger. So I can dodge my anger and go into finger-pointy blame.
And when a partner is in that process where they're blaming, how does the receiving partner of the blame guide the blamer back into a place without just shaming or blaming them about their blame?
They hold up a force field so that the blame doesn't get through. They can't fall into the frame. Oh, they're blaming me. Yes, I'm bad and wrong. Or no, you're bad and wrong. Anything that dances with the blame reinforces it. The only thing to do with the blame is to let it hit your force field and like go ping and fall down. Let the other person have their angry, blamey feelings. Don't take them personally. Stay in an empowered stance with yourself and attune to your sensations. If that person is refusing to feel their anger, the only chance you have of them possibly feeling their anger is for you to stay with your feelings. Because now you create a field where you're demonstrating energetically, I'm going to stay with my breath and my feelings, and I'm going to stay with my sensations or take myself out of the space to protect myself. And the more I stay with my feelings, the more chance you're going to have to stay with yours. And if I remove myself from the space while you're angry and blaming, then you've just lost your audience. And after a long period of time, if you remove yourself every time your partner is shamey, blamey, they will learn. They start, you leave. Not forever. You just go into your bedroom, you leave the room, and you have to train them by bankrupting the attention that their anger gets, because that's what they're trying to get, is your attention. Yeah. If you remove your attention, you don't have to yell. You just literally take away the attention, and they have nothing to anger towards. And you'll train the animal. Oh, when I go into blamey, shamey, anger, I lose their attention, and then they'll start doing something else.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a tactic that
Yeah.
that Maggie and I will do. Is we'll do emphasis on exhalations and breath holds and like humming, or even sometimes I'll have like a paper bag and do like some CO2 circulation, which all like calms the nervous system. And
all of those don't involve stories, explanations, shames, and blames. They're all somatic experiences.
yeah,
That's what nobody does.
yeah.
And that's what basically I'm training my clients to do more and more.
Another one I learned that I thought was cool is if a couple is in some type of reactionary state, to not proceed into like the verbal communication about the thing until you're both at an 8 out of 10.
Back to normal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 10 out of 10 is like, cool, I'm totally chilling. I'm at the beach,
Yes.
we're hanging out. 8 is like, okay, like I feel a thing, but like I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm not tripping.
I love that.
And so within that, some like tools or tactics would be like, that would be kind of like you could go through like some iteration of like body mapping in a way of like understanding your partner of what brings them from a 4 to a 5 to a 6 to a 7. So it could be like foot massage, or it could be like, can I get you some water? Or can I like do some active service for you? Can I,
As long as it's not entitled. As long as it's always a gift. If someone's like, well, I need a hug. If you hugged me, then I'd feel better. Then they're using the other person as a regulation pacifier.
Yeah.
It always has to be treated as a gift from both partners.
Right. Exactly.
And when it's a gift, then you can offer it. Like if someone was sick, you make them breakfast. But if they're acting, where's my breakfast?
Yeah.
Then suddenly.
I find touch to be the easiest because it doesn't have a cost inherent in it, and it mutually is healthy and healing for both parties. Like in me touching, I am also being touched.
Yes.
And so I find like physical, obviously
Totally.
I'm like a very physical person, but so physicality to me, I think is such a hack in relationship.
It's a great hack. And we evolved from physical, like amygdala, so lizards have just survival and sexuality and food. That's all they're managing.
Yeah.
And touch. And then there's emotional, social, which is the limbic system. And then there's the cognitive. So when you're resolving a fight, you always want to move in the order of evolution. So I have my clients, if they can, touch anywhere. When I'm fighting with my husband, even if we're like cursing, I grab his foot. We're always touching. So our animal lizard parts are like, our togetherness is still true, even though we're still resolving.
Yeah.
Once the physical is in connection and safety, then you can get emotional validation and resonance. What were you feeling? Okay, it makes sense that you're feeling that. Don't go to the cognitive resolution of the issue until after the first two are in place. Almost everybody goes straight to, well, what's the problem? Let's dissect the issue. They go straight into a cognitive. Why? Because they're dissociating from the physical sensations, the emotional counterpart, and they don't want to go. They don't want to be in their body, so they go straight to the cognitive. So I'm always guiding the couple to let's get safe. Let's take some breaths and regulate, like you guys are doing, touch. Let's share the emotional experience you're both having and validate and honor each other's emotional space. And then let's go to the cognitive problem-solving anatomy of the issue.
But have you seen the videos that, I think maybe it's like some new circulation videos that I've seen of women being asked what their response to their boyfriend or husband or whoever crying in front of them. Okay. And I think that the suggestion would be that most girls would desire their partner to be like able to cry and show emotion and such.
Yeah.
And then also I think there can be a fear that I've seen perpetuated through some of those videos that I've seen of the woman might say that she wants that or she desires that, but then underneath that she actually is like, it actually is a turnoff.
Well, remember I told you fall in love with an attachment figure. You fall in love with someone who replicates the attachment dynamic. Mm-hmm. Well, if your mind is treating your partner as a parent, it's hard when your parents cry. Just feel the feeling of my mom and dad are crying. Notice the part of you that's uncomfortable and needs to rescue and wants to make it better. Most people don't just go, oh, my parents are crying. They're human. Yay. So if your partner, say it's a man, is crying, your sophisticated, developmental, emotionally savvy woman self is like, yeah, I want my man to be emotionally developed and cry. But their little young girl inside that's seeking a daddy take care of me dance, they won't like the crying. Because suddenly you've gone from daddy to now you're crying, so she might have to take care of you. When a woman is fully autonomous and doesn't rely on her partner for him to take care of her, rescue her emotionally, She has all the energy in the world to hold him when he cries.
Right.
She's inspired by it. It calls forward her nurturing, but not if you're acting like a little girl on the inside. Then suddenly you're the parent, but you're the, so there's a fight over who's going to be the little kid.
Right. That's
if you're fully integrated and developed, someone crying is just a beautiful expression of their humanity.
You'd probably see it as strength.
Yeah, I see crying as the response to a moment of maximal aliveness. So when someone's crying, I'm like, oh, your aliveness is up at the surface. Like, I want to live one thought away from tears if I could.
Yeah.
And so when someone's crying, especially a man, you can feel it at the back of your throat, the tears coming up. And so in that moment, a man can choose to cry and be honest, or to lie and suppress the tears. And everybody wants to be honest. I don't think many people see the suppression of the tears or the acting bro, punch in the arm, is actually a lie. It's less valorous, less courageous. It takes way more courage to stay with your sensation and your emotion and to express it in real time. And unfortunately, we have a lot of women in the world that don't know how to regulate themselves and are treating their men as their saviors. And I'm trying to work on them. But until they upgrade to become woman mother material, they will be uncomfortable with their man crying. And, a man's not looking... A man is looking for a woman to be the leader of his future family. So when he's on a date with a woman, he's asking, can this woman lead my family? Can she hang when shit gets hectic?
Yeah.
A man falls in love with the woman he feels the most alive around, not happy. And alive includes the full spectrum. Joy, ecstasy, tears of joy, happiness, excitement, shame, jealousy, rage, despair, all of it. So when a man feels all my emotions are welcome here, then he's like, this is my woman. And how does a woman show that? She has to honor all her emotions. She has to honor them and dignify them and not blame anyone else for them, give them full expression without needing anyone else to change to accommodate them. When she's in her full aliveness, she gives permission to him to be in his full aliveness. And I think we fall in love with the person we feel most alive around. I basically want people to not give up, not give up on relationship, not give up on the possibility of finding a partner wherever you're at, whether you're single, whether you're in a relationship, whether you're having drama. Don't give up on the practice. Every interaction with a man or a woman is either the one or practice for the one. So always bring your A game.
Right.
Olympic athletes, they don't go to rehearsal and just go, well, it's not the Olympics, I'll just do half-ass.
Just practice.
You bring your A game in every interaction. And, if someone is a single woman or man, single man, I would say every woman that you talk to, treat her as if she's a ambassador of the divine feminine, and she was sent back in time from your future soulmate to see where you are in your growth path. Every woman that a man meets, she's feeling, does she feel valued? Does she feel dignified in his presence? Even if it's like a 6-year-old girl or an 80-year-old woman. How you relate to the divine feminine is an indication of whether you're ready for your future partner. So
That's
just practice with every woman you meet. See the goddess in her. Even if you're just holding the door open at the pharmacy, see the goddess in her. And imagine every woman you meet is going to go home at night and write an email to your future soulmate and say, he's ready for you, or not, right? And if you're a woman, every man you meet, treat him like a king, every man, because you're practicing how you dance with the masculine. So that when your soulmate shows up, you'll have mastered the dance. So that's what I would say for single people.
I love that so much. That's another, I reference Ram Dass entirely too much, but one of the things that he talks about on occasion is some of the happenings in our lives or people that perturb us or anything of the sort is like God in drag.
Yes.
And so as you're saying that, I was thinking, because I'm a fella, obviously, I was thinking like it would probably be sensible also to treat every man that you meet, bro, little kid, older grandpa, whatever, even, as a guy is similarly, as a
But
god
if you're
and
looking for a
goddess.
woman, I would treat every woman. Because usually the imprint we have from our original archetype of the feminine is our mother.
Yeah.
And whatever good, bad, or ugly happened in our dynamic with our mother gets smeared across every woman you meet for the rest of your life. So every Starbucks barista, every girl you had a crush on, every girlfriend is smeared with that original imprint. And so what this requires you to do is to clean up your dynamic with the woman
I love that.
that you're interacting with, because she is literally an instantiation of the divine feminine. And your partner can feel whether you can king by how much of a queen she feels in your presence. Because people don't fall in love with you. They fall in love with how they feel about themselves around you. And so you're always looking for, what situation do I feel most beautiful, intelligent, alive around? And then you want to be in those situations. So you have to be that for your partner.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been my delight.
This is so lovely.
Yay.
I was trying to pull things that you were doing that we could talk about for people to get more involved before. You mentioned there was don't you have like a coaching program coming up in May or some?
Yeah, so I have private clients that I teach. I have a select few of those, but I also teach relationship coaches, my own technology. It's called Heart Coach, and I have a cohort starting at the end of May.
Oh, cool.
And so someone could just join my list on my website.
How do they find it?
AnnieLalla.com, ANNIELALLA, double N and double L. And you can take my free love test to see whether you're in love or whether your partner's in love with you. And then I will let you know when I'm doing a free webinar where you can learn about the program and join if it feels right.
I love that. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I really appreciate this. That is it. That is all. I'll see you guys next week.
Great.